"Can you be my mommy?" begged the little girl to the waitress while her co-single dad froze in tears. The diner lights buzzed softly above rows of red leather booths, casting a gentle warmth against the frost-kissed windows. Outside, snow flurried beneath a street lamp, swirling like little ghosts in the bitter Vermont wind. It was a quiet Friday night in the small town, the kind that crept into the bones and made people seek shelter, comfort, or company, if they had it. Inside, Chloe moved behind the counter with quiet urgency. She was 24, her pale blonde hair twisted into a neat bun, a few wisps framing her tired face. A frayed leather watch clung to her wrist, and the soles of her black shoes had started to peel. But her uniform was clean, her posture straight. No one would guess the tremor that had just passed through her like a wave. She had just finished scrubbing a stack of dishes in the back when her phone buzzed. The text was simple but devastating. "Chloe, your grandma asked for Emily again tonight. She didn't recognize you." He stood still for a moment, wet hands at her sides. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away. Inhaling deeply, she squared her shoulders and walked back into the dining area. Grief, like so many things in her life, would have to wait. At the far end of the diner, tucked into a corner booth, sat Nathan Hale, 35, broad-shouldered, sharply dressed in a navy wool coat. Even seated, he carried the presence of a man used to power. His face was striking, but there was a hollowness in his eyes, a weariness he did not hide. Across from him, swinging her legs and humming softly, sat his daughter, Maddie. Maddie was 5. With a riot of golden brown curls and eyes the color of a summer lake. Clear, curious, impossibly wide. She chatted to herself as she arranged sugar packets into little towers, occasionally glancing up at her father, who sat stiffly, distracted by the glow of his phone. Chloe approached the table with her notepad and a practiced smile. "Good evening. Welcome to Maggie's," she said, her voice warm despite the chill still clinging to her. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" Nathan looked up briefly. "Coffee black," he said, gesturing toward Maddie. "And milk for her." Maddie beamed up at Chloe. "Do you have the kind of milk with the cow on it?" Chloe chuckled. "We sure do," she said, scribbling the order before walking away. As she filled the coffee pot, Chloe felt the burn of unshed tears. Her hands moved mechanically. Cup, pour, tray. But her mind drifted to the nursing home, to how her grandmother used to braid her hair and call her my sunshine. Now she was a stranger. She returned to the table just as Nathan's phone buzzed again. With a sigh, he stood. "Sorry, I need to take this," he muttered and walked outside. Chloe placed the drinks gently on the table. Maddie watched her intently. "You have pretty hair," the girl said. Chloe smiled. "Thank you, that's very sweet of you." There was a pause. Maddie stared at her with a thoughtful expression, as if weighing something important. Then in a soft, sincere voice, she asked, "Can you be my mommy?" Chloe froze. The tray in her hand trembled. Her eyes widened, stunned by the question, its innocence, its weight. She looked down at the child whose gaze held no fear, no joke, only hope. Behind her, the door opened. Nathan stepped back inside, brushing snow from his shoulders. He paused when he saw Chloe's expression, startled, pale, motionless. Then his eyes shifted to Maddie. "What did she say?" he asked quietly, though part of him already knew. Chloe could not answer. Her throat tightened. Maddie turned to her father and said without shame or hesitation, "I asked if she could be my mommy." Nathan stood frozen, breath caught in his chest. His eyes met Chloe's, and in that instant, something cracked in the air between them. He looked at his daughter, then at the waitress, and his carefully controlled world of grief managed, routines followed, emotions buried, began to tremble. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and steady. The car ride home was cloaked in silence, broken only by the soft hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of ice under the tires. The streets of the small town were quiet now, the snowfall steady and unrelenting, muffling even the sound of the world turning. Nathan Hale kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles pale against the steering wheel. His daughter Maddie was fast asleep in the back seat, her head tilted to one side, lips parted in the innocent surrender of dreams. She clutched a worn, threadbare doll close to her chest, one of the last things her mother had given her. Nathan's mind was nowhere on the road. "Can you be my mommy?" The words rang in his head, not loud, not dramatic, just there, relentless, soft, and echoing like a bell in a deep canyon that refused to stop ringing. I glanced at Maddie through the rearview mirror. Her chest rose and fell steadily beneath her pink coat. How could someone so small ask something so massive? His jaw tensed. He gripped the wheel tighter. It was just a child's question, he told himself. Children say strange things, things they do not mean, things they do not understand. But the voice inside him pushed back. Why her? What did she see that I couldn't give? He knew what it was. The warmth in that waitress's voice. The way her eyes softened when she looked at Maddie. The patience, the gentleness he had not been able to summon no matter how hard he tried. He remembered the 6 months of hospital visits, the smell of antiseptic and fading flowers, the heart monitor that never stopped beeping until it did. His wife had fought fiercely until the very end, and when it came, it left Nathan broken in ways he still did not understand. Maddie had been too young to remember clearly, and yet somehow she remembered enough to know what was missing. When they arrived home, Nathan carried Maddie inside, cradling her against his chest. She stirred but did not wake. He tucked her into bed and stood at the doorway, watching her settle. "It's nothing," he told himself again. "She is just 5. She saw a kind face. That is all. But just past midnight, he woke to the sound of a soft voice. He stepped into Maddie's room. She was still asleep, but her arms were wrapped tightly around her pillow. Her lips moved faintly in a whisper. "Miss Chloe, Mommy." Nathan's breath caught. He stood frozen at the door, unable to move or turn away. It was not just a moment anymore, not just a child's whim. 'Twas a wound, one he had never dared to name, suddenly torn wide open. Across town, Chloe stood at the door to her grandmother's room, coat still on, fingers stiff from the cold. Inside, the elderly woman sat in her favorite armchair by the window, humming a lullaby. When she saw Chloe, her eyes lit up, but not with recognition. "Emily," she said joyfully. "You came back," Chloe smiled faintly. She did not correct her. She never did. She crossed the room and knelt beside the chair, gently tucking a shawl over her grandmother's shoulders. "Tell me about the garden again," her grandmother said, leaning into her touch. Chloe brushed a strand of silver hair from her forehead. "It was full of violets," she whispered. Later, when her grandmother had fallen asleep, Chloe sat alone in the kitchen. The air was still, save for the ticking of the old wall clock. On the table sat a framed photo, her mother and father holding a giggling baby. Both had died in a car accident when she was 10. She had grown up moving between relatives until her grandmother took her in. Now even that connection was fading. She was 24, alone and tired but not bitter. She reached out and traced the photo's edge with her finger. Outside, the snow kept falling. The bell above the diner door jingled, and Chloe glanced up from the coffee machine. It was them again. Nathan Hale and his daughter Maddie had become regulars over the past 2 weeks. Always the same time, Tuesdays, Thursdays, sometimes a quiet Sunday morning. Nathan never said much. He ordered coffee black. Maddie always asked for milk with the cow on the label. Chloe noticed them. It was impossible not to, but she kept her distance, careful not to let anything linger in her expression. She greeted them with the same soft smile she gave every customer, asked the same polite questions. Her hands no longer trembled when she approached, but inside she stayed guarded. She was not supposed to feel drawn in. She had learned that the hard way. Still, there was something about the way Maddie always looked for her. The moment they walked in, something about how Nathan, despite his cool demeanor, would glance up when she passed. Just for a second. Never long enough to mean anything. Or maybe just long enough. Parchment. A note was tucked beneath the twine. "Thank you for your kindness, Aunt." She stared at it. It was not the flowers that undid her. It was the handwriting. Neat, uncertain. The thought behind it, no flirtation, no expectation, just gratitude. Her hands trembled as she brought the lavender to her face. The scent was sharp and calming. The tears came before she could stop them. She turned away quickly, wiping her cheeks with her sleeve. No one was there to see. It had been so long since someone had thanked her. Not for service, not for work, but for kindness. She placed the lavender in a mason jar near the window and stood there breathing it in. That night the diner was quiet. Nathan and Maddie sat at their usual booth. Chloe watched from behind the counter. She did not approach, but her eyes lingered longer than she meant them to. Maddie was drawing on the bath of a menu, giggling. Nathan leaned in, asking what she was making. She pointed proudly at a crooked stick figure with wild hair. "That's you," she said. Nathan laughed. A soft, low sound Chloe had never heard before. It was real, unfiltered. Chloe's chest tightened. She turned away, wiping the counter, but then looked again. The warmth between father and daughter, the comfort in their laughter, the quiet bond forming through the cracks of pain. They were healing, and maybe neither of them even realized it. Chloe stood still behind the counter, her rag forgotten in her hand. Her eyes softened even as her smile faded. For just a moment she allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to belong at that table, to be part of that quiet, imperfect, beautiful little world. She blinked the thought away and returned to her work, but her heart was already a little less guarded. It was a gray, late afternoon when Nathan lingered near the counter as Maddie finished her chocolate chip pancake. The dinner was quiet, the hum of the coffee machine the only background noise. Chloe wiped down a table nearby, her movement steady, though she could feel his gaze. "I was wondering," Nathan said, clearing his throat. "Would you consider tutoring Maddie? She's a little behind on her reading." Chloe paused, cloth still in hand. I don't know," she replied. "You're patient with her. She likes you a lot," Nathan added more gently. Chloe glanced at Maddie, now stacking syrup containers into a crooked tower. "It's just I try not to get too involved with customers," she said, her voice softer. "Things can get blurry." Nathan nodded. "I understand." She did not answer that day. But 2 evenings later, as she passed their booth, Maddie tugged on her apron. "Would you come to our house and help me read? I want to be good at it like Daddy." Chloe hesitated. "Only reading?" she asked. Maddie grinned. "And cookies?" "We always have cookies after." So Chloe said, "Yes." The first time she entered their home, Chloe felt the difference. It was modern and quiet, but lived in drawings on the fridge, books on the table, sneakers by the stairs. Maddie led her to the living room where they sat on the rug surrounded by picture books. Clues started with phonics and flashcards, but Maddie was full of questions and stories. Clue learned to follow her rhythm. Over time, the books became bridges. Maddie laughed at her mistakes, and Chloe never corrected harshly, only encouraged. Sometimes Maddie would lean against her shoulder mid-sentence, happy just to be close. Then one day Chloe heard it. "Miss Chloe, Mommy, can you help me with this word?" Chloe blinked. "What did you call me?" Maddie looked up puzzled. "Miss Chloe, Mommy, that's your name?" Chloe smiled, something fluttering in her chest. She did not correct her. The nickname came again and again, and with each repetition, Chloe's heart softened. One evening after a long session, Maddie curled up beside her on the couch. "I wish Mommy had your smile," she murmured, already half asleep. Chloe froze. No one had ever said something like that to her, not even her own mother. She looked at Maddie's small face resting in her lap and gently brushed her hair with a trembling hand. She said nothing. Later that night, as Chloe gathered her things, Nathan met her at the door. "She talks about you all the time," he said quietly. Chloe looked down. "She's sweet. I never asked anyone to replace her mother." Nathan said, his voice sincere. "But I think Maddie's found something in you. Something I haven't been able to give her." Chloe met his eyes. There was no pressure there, just quiet truth. "I don't know what this is," she admitted, "but I'm scared of where it could go." Nathan nodded slowly. "Me too." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was gentle, and something unspoken passed between them, uncertain but real. The park was nearly empty that morning, its walking paths still damp from the rain the night before. The trees stood tall and golden, their leaves carpeting the ground in quiet layers of amber and rust. The autumn air carried a crispness that bit gently at the cheeks, but Maddie insisted on playing outside. Chloe had bundled her in a warm jacket and knit hat, and they now sat side by side on a wooden bench near the playground. Maddie's legs dangled off the edge, swinging back and forth as she watched a squirrel dart across the grass. Chloe sipped from a paper cup of hot cider. Maddie held a smaller one with both hands, careful not to spill. For a long time they said nothing, just breathed in the cold, listened to the wind. Then without looking up, Maddie spoke. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course," Chloe said gently. Maddie kept her eyes on the trees. "Sometimes I dream about a lady." Chloe tilted her head. "A lady? She's kind. She never talks, but she hugs me real tight, and she smells like." Maddie paused, sniffing the air near Chloe's coat. "Like you, like flowers and soap and warm stuff." Chloe's breath hitched, but she stayed quiet. "In my dream," Maddie continued, "the lady never has a face. It's always blurry, but I know it's her and I know she loves me." Chloe swallowed. "That's a very special dream." Maddie nodded slowly. "I used to think it was just a dream, but then I met you." Chloe turned her head, unsure if she had heard right. Maddie looked up at her, her voice low and steady. "I prayed. Every night I asked if someone could come and be my mommy. And then you came to Artable." There was no trace of doubt in her voice, no hesitation. "I knew it was you," Maddie said simply, "because you made me feel safe. Like in my dream." Chloe felt the words settled into her like soft stones. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her throat was tight, her heart louder than her thoughts. She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Maddie's cheek. "You're a very brave little girl," she whispered. Maddie leaned into her side, resting her head on Chloe's arm. Behind them, unnoticed, Nathan stood at a distance near the edge of the walking path. He held a cup of coffee untouched and growing cold in his hand. He had come by chance, returning from a meeting earlier than expected. He had not planned to follow them, but when he saw Chloe and Maddie walking toward the park together, something in him had pulled him along quietly, carefully. And now, hearing Maddie's voice carry softly through the breeze, he stood frozen. "I knew it was you because you made me feel safe." Nathan's fingers tightened around the cup, the lid bending inward slightly under the pressure. His eyes stung in the cold air, but it was not the wind that made them red. He had tried for years to fill the emptiness his daughter carried, tried to be enough for her in every way. But children do not need perfection. They need connection, and she had found it. Not in structure, not in routine, not in safety nets of his own making, but in Chloe. He did not step forward, did not interrupt. He just stood there listening to the breeze, the birds, the small voice of his daughter, and the silence of something shifting deep inside him. The acceptance letter came on a Tuesday morning, slipped under the apartment door in a plain white envelope. Chloe stared at it for a long time before she opened it, her fingers hesitant, as if afraid the words inside would shift the ground beneath her feet. "Congratulations. You have been awarded a full scholarship to the School of Psychology, Boston University." Her breath caught in her throat. She had applied on a whim months ago, never expecting a reply. Certainly not an offer like this. Full ride, a chance to finish what she started. The dream she had quietly buried the day her grandmother began forgetting her name. Now it was real and terrifying. She read the letter 3 times before folding it carefully and placing it on the counter. That night she said nothing to Maddie during their reading session. She smiled, helped her through her alphabet cards, even stayed for one of Nathan's signature chocolate chip cookies. But something in her was already pulling away. The next evening she sat on the edge of her bed staring at her suitcase. It was half-packed. She had made up her mind. She would leave quietly. Goodbyes, no promises. Maddie would not understand, but Chloe convinced herself that disappearing without a farewell would be kinder than watching a child cry and ask why. It was not just a scholarship. It was an escape from the fear of wanting too much. She wrote a short note, left it on Nathan's porch, and took the first taxi to the train station the next morning. The platform was nearly empty when she arrived. A sharp wind cut through her coat as she climbed aboard and found a seat near the window. Her suitcase sat at her feet. Her hands were tucked into her lap, fingers cold, restless. The train was not due to leave for another 10 minutes. She stared out at the platform, watching the snowflakes settle on the empty benches. Her chest felt tight, but she told herself she had done the right thing. She had to go before she asked for something she was not allowed to want. Then a flicker of movement caught her eye. Her eye. Nathan was standing outside the window. He looked calm on the surface, coat buttoned neatly, hands in his pockets, but his eyes betrayed him. They were tired, red-wounded. He stepped forward without a word, opened the train door, and walked down the aisle until he stood beside her seat. Chloe could not speak. She simply looked up at him, her mouth parted slightly, heart racing. Nathan reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. He held it in his hand for a moment, then placed it gently on the seat beside her. A small pink scarf, Maddie's. The fabric was soft and worn with a tiny snag near one end where the threads had begun to fray. Chloe lifted it slowly, running her thumb over the stitching. She brought it to her chest and held it there, the scent faint but familiar. It smelled like crayons and sugar and something far more fragile. Home. Nathan still said nothing. He gave her one last look, something between goodbye and regret, and then turned and walked away. Chloe watched him through the window as he stepped off the train and disappeared into the snowfall, his tall figure slowly fading into a blur of white and gray. Her eyes brimmed, but she blinked quickly, refusing to let them fall. Noon called her name. No one ran after her. It was exactly how she had planned it, and yet, as the train pulled away from the station, Chloe sat alone. Maddie's scarf clutched tightly in her arms, her chest aching with something far too heavy to name. The package arrived on a quiet Sunday morning. Chloe found it on her doorstep, wrapped in plain brown paper, the handwriting on the front unmistakably childlike, her name in purple crayon. She brought it inside with trembling hands and sat at the small kitchen table, where sunlight filtered through half-open blinds. For a moment she just stared, afraid to hope, afraid to feel. Then carefully she peeled away the paper. Inside was a spiral-bound sketchbook. On the cover, a sticker that read, "My Dream Family." The first page showed a crayon drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a crooked sun. One had brown hair and a tie. The smallest wore a pink dress. The one in the middle had blonde hair in a bun and a heart on her shirt. Chloe pressed her hand to her mouth. Tucked inside the back cover was a single sheet of lined paper folded twice. The handwriting here was neater, deliberate. It had the histrionic censorship bleeding cool. "Chloe, she hasn't stopped asking for you." Every day, every night she drew this last week and said, "This is what I want more than anything. If this dream can be yours too." "I'll wait, Nathan." Chloe sat still for a long time. Her fingers traced the words again and again. She read the letter, then the drawing, then the letter again. The ache in her chest returned, not the kind that breaks you, but the kind that reminds you you're still alive. She stood, Nathan was stirring a pot when he heard the soft knock at the door. Maddie was in the living room, humming as she dressed hurdles for imaginary dinner. He wiped his hands on a towel and opened the door. There she was. Chloe stood on the porch, wind-brushing strands of blonde hair across her face. Her coat was buttoned, her cheeks pink from the cold. But her eyes, those warm amber eyes, held the same unspoken question his letter had offered. Nathan didn't speak right away. He just stepped back, holding the door open. She hesitated, then stepped inside. The house smelled like roasted vegetables and garlic. It smelled like home. Nathan walked to the kitchen. Hanging on a hook was a worn apron with a messy finger-painted sun, and Maddie's name scribbled in the corner. He put it on and reached into a drawer. When he turned, he held out a pair of small floral oven mitts. He offered them to her, his voice quiet but steady. Dinner tastes better when someone adds love to it. Chloe couldn't speak at first. She took the gloves slowly, her fingers brushing his. They lingered just long enough to say everything words could not. A sound broke the silence. Tiny footsteps raced across the floor. Maddie turned the corner. The moment she saw Chloe, she froze, then crumpled. "You came back," she whispered, then louder, already crying. "Mommy." She ran forward, throwing her arms around Chloe's legs. Chloe knelt, holding her close. One hand in Maddie's curls, the other trembling. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "So much." Across the street, an elderly couple watched from their window. The woman nudged her husband and smiled. "She came home," she said. He nodded. "Love always finds a way." Inside, Nathan returned to the stove. Chloe stood, still holding Maddie's hand. "Want to help me set that edible?" he asked. Chloe smiled. Real, full, and for the first time in years unafraid. "Yes," she said. "I would love to." The bookstore was filled with soft murmurs and the scent of fresh pages. A colorful banner hung above Thesmall stage reading, "Book Launch. The Girl Who Found Her Mother in Someone Else's Smile" by Chloe Bennett. Rows of folding chairs had been arranged in front of the podium, nearly all full. Parents, children, teachers, neighbors. Some came out of curiosity, others because they had watched Chloe grow up, fall, and rise again. Chloe stood just behind the curtain, gripping the edges of her note cards, though she had read them 100 times. Her hair was loose now, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. A thin gold chain with a tiny heart-shaped charm rested at her collarbone, Maddie's gift on her first Mother's Day. The past 2 years had changed everything. Not instantly, not perfectly, but completely. Her book had been born from a little girl's question. Her healing had begun with that same question. And now, this story, Maddie's story, would sit on library shelves and nightstands waiting for someone else who needed it. She peeked through the curtain and saw Maddie in the front row, legs swinging, eyes glowing. Nathan sat beside her, his hand on her back as he whispered something that made her giggle. He looked calmer now, softer, like a man who had made peace with his past. She thought of the non-profit he had launched that year for children who'd lost parents, named in honor of his late wife. It was not about forgetting. It was about remembering with love and moving forward with purpose. Chloe had stood beside him at the ribbon cutting, holding Maddie's hand. "Are you ready, Mommy?" Maddie whispered now, peeking behind the curtain. Chloe crouched and kissed her forehead. "Only if you are." When Chloe stepped onto the stage, warm applause filled the room. She paused at the podium, blinking against the lights, then found Nathan and Maddie in the crowd. The nerves melted. She spoke not from the note cards, but from her heart about stories, how they help us feel what we do not yet understand, how children often teach us what love truly means long before we think we are ready to receive it. At the end, as applause rose again, Maddie walked up to the stage. The crowd smiled, expecting a photo. Instead, she leaned close and whispered, "I prayed for you, and Daddy must have heard it too." Chloe's breath caught. She closed her eyes and let the tears come, not from pain, but from something deeper, a fullness, a knowing. She hugged Maddie tightly, her voice too full to respond. The room fell quiet, a hush like a shared breath. Everyone could feel it. This was not just a book launch. It was something sacred. That evening, they walked through the blooming neighborhood park. The air smelled of spring and promise. Chloe pushed a stroller inside which a baby boy slept beneath a knitted blanket. Maddie walked beside her, holding her hand. Nathan followed just a step behind, watching them both with quiet awe. They passed a bench where an elderly woman sat watching the sunset. She looked at them, the stroller, the way Maddie's fingers curled around Chloe's, the way Nathan's gaze stayed close and smiled. "Are you a family?" she asked gently. Nathan paused. Esme led but did not answer. Maddie turned, curls bouncing. She looked up at the woman and said without hesitation, "Yes, we are. We're what family means." As they walked on, Chloe glanced at Nathan, her eyes warm. He reached for a hand and she let their fingers intertwine. He leaned in and whispered, "Just for her. You didn't just come back. You completed us." Chloe smiled, misty-eyed. She looked ahead, open, sunlit, winding, but no longer lonely. That night, in the soft nursery glow, with Maddie asleep in the next room and their baby breathing quietly between them, Nathan pulled her close. "I love you," he whispered. "Igno," she said, resting her head on his chest. "I love you too." And in that quiet, ordinary moment full of warmth and lavender-scented air, they knew this was it. The dream, the family, the home they had waited for. Thank you for joining us on this heartwarming journey of love, healing, and family. If this story moved you, made you smile, cry, or simply feel, then you're exactly why soul-stirring stories exist. Don't forget to hit that hype button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that touches the soul. We do not just tell stories, we stir something deeper. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next one.